Hey everyone, my name is Jose and I work as a guide for the Central Park Conservancy. Now, on behalf of everyone here, I'd like to welcome you all on our weekly walk to the playgrounds of Central Park. Now, the images that you folks are going to be looking at today, they were actually taken by myself within the last week, but you'll also see some historic images, and these are going to be taken from the New York Historical Society, the Library of Congress, and the New York City Parks Department archives, as well as our own official archives here at the Conservancy. Now, our official mission here at the Central Park Conservancy is to preserve and celebrate Central Park Sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. And basically, we've been hard at work doing this since 1980. Okay, so let's actually go ahead and go over our route for today. So we're going to be making our way from the east side of the park at 67th Street, and then we're going to head west. Now, along the way, we're going to explore a few Central Park's interesting playgrounds. In addition, we're also going to check out some of the areas that have historically attracted children of all ages to play in. Okay, so here we are at the park entrance along Fifth Avenue and 67th Street, which actually sees quite a lot of families since it's not too far off from attractions like the zoo and the mall. Now, I took the images for this walk on a very, very rainy Friday morning. So you'll see lots of puddles, but not a lot of people. Now, as you might expect, there are virtually no children in any of the playgrounds I visited. But to kind of make up for the weather, you're going to see lots of peak fall foliage colors all throughout, such as this very beautiful, lovely American elm tree with lots of lovely shades of yellows and oranges. Now, as soon as we enter and we look to our right-hand side, we can actually start to see the rustic wooden gates of Billy Johnson Playground, which is one of 21 within the boundaries of Central Park. Now, each one of these playgrounds is actually entirely unique, and this one is, of course, no exception. In fact, I think it's probably one of the more interesting ones here in the park. Now, at first glance, the Billy Johnson Playground looks more like a carefully landscaped garden than a place where children would play. Now, here you're going to find plantings like shrubs and trees of all kinds, as well as other things as well, such as benches, basically things that you'll be able to find within the park itself. And that's because Billy Johnson was meant to serve as almost like a scaled down model of Central Park. One of the more prominent features of this playground is actually the stone bridge that you folks are looking at, which is basically a child-friendly version of the nearby Gapstow Bridge. And right next to that, you're going to see these granite slides, one of which, the one on the right-hand side, is actually about 45 feet long. Now, these were meant to recreate the experience of sliding down one of the many rock outcrops in the park. And here you can see a rustic shelter that was inspired by our iconic wooden pavilions. Now, you can definitely bet that this is quite a popular spot for parents and caretakers to relax in while their kids go out and play. And here we can see the rustic wooden architecture of Billy Johnson Playground. It's definitely kind of like a recurring theme here in this area. And of course, you can definitely see that here with these handcrafted swing sets. And here along these benches nearby, you can actually see a structure that's kind of reminiscent of the park's wooden pergolas. Now, while I didn't get to see any families or kids at play on this very rainy morning, I did, however, get to see this very hungry squirrel that was eyeing me the entire time, hoping that, of course, I would have some food for it. All righty, and moving on, and we make our way from Billy Johnson Playground towards our next stop. And to get there, we'll need to actually wind our way through the Dean landscape. And just up ahead, you can see the statue of Balto, the famed Siberian husky that saved countless lives in 1925 by leading a team of sled dogs to deliver a vaccine to the remote community of Nome, Alaska. Now, this monument is, of course, well loved by local children who often like to climb on top of it. In fact, as you can see on Balto's coat, much of the bronze has really already started to fade away from decades of kids basically riding and touching it. And after making a left turn at the Balto statue, we're going to head right up the steps of the Dean Slope past this very brightly colored sweet gum tree. Now, our next few stops are going to be located within the Children's District, which was actually envisioned by the early park developers as basically as a place for kids and families to kind of gather around. And just up ahead, you can actually start to see now a glimpse of one of our favorite park buildings. And this, of course, this is going to be the dairy. Now, we've explored the dairy before in previous weekly walks and virtual tours, but in case you've forgotten, this beautiful neo-Gothic structure was meant to serve snacks and fresh, clean milk for children visiting the park in the 19th century. And today, the dairy is actually one of the main visitor centers of the park. Here you can actually find a retail gift shop that supports the Conservancy's mission of maintaining Central Park. By the way, the dairy actually recently just opened just last week after about a year of renovations. So definitely come check out this very lovely building and say hello to our visitor service staff if you're ever around the area. And just outside the dairy building, you can actually find this small rocky hill. Now, this is going to be the Kinderberg, which, believe it or not, was meant to serve as something like a playground back in the 1800s. You can actually still see the steps carved onto it that would actually invite kids to play. In fact, if you know any Dutch or German, then you know that the word Kinderberg itself actually means children's hill. Now, back then, there were no official playgrounds in the park. In fact, playgrounds as we know them today with their colorful equipment like slides and swings really only became popular in the 20th century. Before that, some parks might have set aside large open meadows for kids to play on, like the one that we see here. But there were no permanent play equipment at all. However, by the 1930s, Central Park was basically constructing playgrounds that we in the 21st century would actually recognize. Now, this image published in 1942 shows one of these new playgrounds in the park. And as you can see, it's got these monkey bars that were really quite attractive to younger visitors. Alrighty, and moving along now, and we're going to make our way towards the next playground on our route. Now, after a few minutes of walking, we come to these stone pillars, basically marking the entrance to the largest and the oldest playground in Central Park. This, of course, is going to be Heckscher Playground. Now, Heckscher Playground was built back in 1926. And at the time, there's actually a citywide debate that raged on about whether parks should build dedicated spaces with play equipment for children. You have to remember that Central Park was designed back in the 1850s, mostly for relaxing and enjoying nature, but not for actively playing on. This was basically a place for passive passive recreation. But thankfully, the Parks Department decided to add these modern playgrounds to the landscape. Now, Heckscher is a very large playground that's able to accommodate hundreds of kids. It's got plenty of features that really anybody would recognize as parts of a playground. So here, for example, you can see common play equipment like swing sets and, of course, a slide as well. But Heckscher Playground also has a few unique features that you won't find in most other playgrounds, like these concrete mounds and walkways that were designed to encourage and foster children's imaginations. By the way, the concrete structure is actually sitting right in front of this very famous rocky outcrop in the park called Umpire Rock. You can actually see it right in the background. Oftentimes, you're going to see kids and even adults climbing on top of this rock, essentially kind of be using Umpire Rock as a space to play on. Now, here's the view from the top of Umpire Rock on a very, very, very busy spring day. Now, this whole area that we're looking at is all part of Heckscher Playground. And as you might imagine, it does actually attract families from all over the place. Okay, so from Heckscher, we're going to start heading north and we're going to check out other play areas. So let's actually go ahead and kind of follow this nice little pathway. And looking southeast along the path, we can see this the ball field here. This is part of what's called Heckscher Ball Fields. Now, just like the nearby Heckscher Playground, this is going to be named after the wealthy philanthropist August Heckscher, who funded playgrounds and services to the city's children back in the early 20th century. Today, you can find 6 fields here for softball, all of which require a permit through the Parks Department. Alrighty, and moving on now, and we cross West Drive, heading north for a bit along the gravel path of the Bridle Trail. Now, right at this intersection, we're going to make a left turn and we're going to check out the last 2 playgrounds on our walk. And here we can see the gates into Tarcoin Tots Playground. Now, while it may look like your run-of-the-mill neighborhood playground, it's actually got a very interesting history. Now, it was built back in 1956 as the result of a highly publicized conflict known in the press as the Battle of Central Park. Now, basically, in the 1950s, the Parks Department under Commissioner Robert Moses wanted to build up a parking lot here. You have to understand that Robert Moses was one of the most powerful men in the country at this point in time, and he usually got his way. However, there were a few local citizen activists who weren't too keen on this idea, and they actually filed a lawsuit that barred him from completing the project. And as a concession to local families, the park then built up a playground on the site. These days, few folks are actually aware of just how much history and contention this small, tiny little playground has seen more than half a century ago. Today, it's best known as a haven for local families. The Tots Playground, as the name suggests, is of course for the use of toddlers and younger kids. And as such, you're going to find equipment designed for smaller children, such as these swing sets. You're also going to find this tiny little slide that's great for growing toddlers. And of course, let's not forget these nice little sandboxes that kids just absolutely love. Alrighty, and continuing on from here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and walk a few steps west towards our last playground of the day. And why don't we go ahead and make our way right on up this path. All right, and now we come to the gates of Adventure Playground, which sits on the west side of the park at 68th Street. So let's actually go ahead and make our way in and see what's in store for us today. Now, right off the bat, we can tell that this playground is going to be a little bit different than most. So, for example, we can see lots of concrete here that's actually laid down into abstract shapes, almost as if we were in a public plaza or a square. Now, here's the original 1966 layout of Adventure Playground. I think this is actually very interesting because this looks nothing like a playground for children at all. If anything, it looks more like a modernist interpretation of gears in a machine. But just like the other playgrounds that we've seen today, this one with all of its non-conventional shapes is actually quite historic. It was actually designed by the architect Richard Dottner in the 1960s, at a time when new ideas of child psychology and urban park design really started to take hold around the country. Adventure Playground was one of the very first in Central Park that was built according to these new principles, which emphasized fostering creativity by encouraging kids to interact with non-conventional, free-form play equipment within an adult-free environment. So here you can actually see these mounds that, of course, invite kids to climb on top of. And here we have this very beautiful wooden pyramid with slides on it. Now, both pyramids and mounds were actually a very popular aspect of this new type of playground, which was going to be imported from Denmark and the UK during the post-World War II era. And of course, there's also this granite-faced structure that functions as a climber, as a maze, and a hiding spot, making it, of course, great for games like hide and seek. Now, when the playground was first built up, it was definitely seen as this revolutionary, brand new thing. And other playgrounds in New York City, including several here in Central Park, really started to copy this exact model. Now, since the 1980s, the Central Park Conservancy has either rebuilt or restored many of these 20th century playgrounds, including this one, which we actually last updated back in 2015. All right, so on our walk today, we've explored some very unique play areas around the pool, and of course, we've also touched on some of their histories. Now, kids absolutely love these playgrounds, and since they were first built up back in the 1930s, they've definitely become a welcome addition to the landscape. All right, and with that, I thank you all so much for joining us today. Don't forget to follow us on our official social media accounts like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube as well. Definitely leave us a comment. You can use the hashtag #TheParkNeedsUs, and we'll feature it. And from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, stay safe and be well. Have a good day.